Hello, hello. I'm so excited to have you joining. I am thrilled to talk about the Chief of Staff in AI, and I am going to share my screen so we can get this started because I like to start on time. And that being said, this is going to be recorded, so folks who join, you'll have an opportunity to reach out to me afterwards. I love seeing the folks that are here. Welcome, Hannah, Wendy, everybody else who's showing up. It's wonderful to spend some time with you, whether it's the morning or the evening, and talk about two topics that I'm very passionate about. One has to do with the chief of staff role and its role and how important it is. The second one has to do with AI. And we're always trying to figure out, how do you use AI? Is AI going to take like all of these questions that we're hearing? You know, I tell folks AI is a tool. Learn how to use the tool so you can be successful in your role. So, before I get started, if you can send me a thumbs up or just let me know, can you see my screen? I just want to make sure that everybody can see what's out there. In the past, Zoom has not been kind to me. And so, Hannah, thank you so much. I appreciate you just letting me know that you can see my screen. Thank you, Wendy. And folks, as I'm going through the presentation, if you find that you've got a question, go ahead and post it into the chat or use the QA function. My assistant is on the call, and if I don't see it, she's going to see it, and she is going to ping me to make sure that I stay honest and truthful and make sure that I get to those questions. So thank you, Wendy. Oh my goodness, we're gonna have to get together. Thank you. Thank you. I love the red hair. So why not do something different? But again, I'm so excited to have you here. And like I said, I'm just gonna jump right into this because you're here because you've got questions, and I hope that I can share at least some of the answers that I've come up with. And again, let's make sure that we stay in contact. So let's get started. I do have some new faces that are on the call, and that always excites me. So, for the people who don't really know me, let me give you a little bit of introduction to myself. My name is Anne Marie Otanias, and I'm the Chief of Staff Architect. I'm an author. I've written a book called The Chief of Staff. I'm going to give you a sneak peek into my second one. I'm a speaker. I enjoy having the opportunity to talk to folks, whether they're in the United States or outside the United States. Last year, I was very privileged to travel to both Toronto and London to speak to an audience about the Chief of Staff role. And I just got back from London this past week, and I'm heading off to Toronto in August to do a workshop. I've worked for some amazing companies that I've listed, and then I listed some of my credentials, not because I think I want you all to see all the credentials that I have, but I love to learn. And so I look for opportunities where I can just get better. And having a certificate is really nice. I have my own Chief of Staff Academy where people can get certified, but it's great to be able to learn and hear different perspectives about things that are going on out there. So I am beyond thrilled that I have an opportunity to keep learning and that I enjoy learning. I probably wouldn't have said that my senior year in high school, if I were to be honest. I'm pretty sure that when I was done with school at that point, I was like, I'm done. I never want to go back to school. And so I haven't necessarily gone back to school, but I do enjoy the opportunity to learn. I said a little bit about my first book, which is The Chief of Staff. I wrote this book a couple years ago, and I am a fan of trilogies. I'm a little bit of a nerd that way. I love it. I have done Lord of the Ring watch parties. Um, I haven't necessarily done them with Harry Potter, but my husband loves Harry Potter. So, my second book, I just completed it, and it's called The Chief of Staff: Impact and Outcome, a Tale in Three Acts. And I'm so excited about this because what I do is I take whatever you've learned in book one and build upon it. So you understand the foundational aspects of being a chief of staff. And in book two, what we talk about is, how do you define impact and outcomes? That's something that's really, really hard for people that are in roles like a chief of staff. Because when things are working well, it's the analogy of the duck on water. Everything on the top seems like it's going well, but underneath the feet are moving like crazy. Well, the chief of staff is in the background, making sure that everything is working well. So everything above the water is going well. So I am thrilled for you to get a sneak peek into this book. Ping me after this call so we can chat about it. Like I said, I'm excited that I finally completed it and we'll be looking to launch that very, very shortly. I believe that we should be a whole person whenever we talk about ourselves. Now, also, when you're being your whole person, you want to make sure that you feel like it's in a safe space. And so you want to kind of test those waters. I love to lead with me being a whole person. So what do they call me at home? My parents are from the little island of Haiti, and I'm very proud to be a Haitian American. I'm a daughter of immigrants who have always worked very, very hard and continue to work extremely hard and teach me all the time how to be a contributing member of society by the things that I do. I put that I'm a mother, first role forever. And so my husband and I have been married for about 9 years. And during that time, we tried very, very hard to welcome little ones into our home. And very difficult journey. It didn't happen. We experienced a lot of loss. Um, it was just tough. And that's a subject for another day, but that's something that I feel that we probably should talk more about and be open about because uh, it's not always that pretty picture on Facebook. There are things that are happening in the background that can be crushing. And so we tried very hard and so unsuccessful, loving, supportive friends and family to comfort us when things didn't quite go the way that we thought they were going to go. But in August of last year, we were so blessed with the opportunity to take home from the hospital a beautiful little girl who just turned, excuse me, 10 months. And I am loving being a mom, absolutely loving it in every capacity that I can be a mom. So that's why I've got mother there. I'm a wife. My husband is my partner in everything. And lastly, but not less important, I'm an auntie. And there's a lot of aunties, but I'm the favorite. And we all know, but we just, we just say that to ourselves. So that's what they call me at home. I talked about my home team. This is my home team. My husband and my beautiful little girl, Milagro. And Milagro means miracle in Spanish for those of you who don't speak Spanish. And if you do speak Spanish, you know. So for me, family is first and always. And I have found it has been a wonderful shift of priorities, welcoming this beautiful little one into our home. The things that were important or less important and things that I didn't even know would be important are paramount right now. And it's been a beautiful thing to do things for my home team. So I'm extremely grateful for that. And that's why, again, I say when you have opportunities to show up, you define how you want to show up, whether you feel like you can show up with all of yourself or just part of yourself. But make sure it's a safe space where you can show up and be truly authentic to who you are and how you're doing what you do so well and why you're doing what you do so well. Now let's jump into the meat of this presentation. We're going to talk a little bit about AI. It's interesting to me because there's a lot of narrative out there around you've got to hurry up and learn all this stuff about AI and get on board and there's this a little bit of this FOMO that's going on with AI. I don't know if you feel it. Sometimes I feel it. But AI has been around for a while, and we are just starting to crack the nut of this AI. And so, what I wanted to do is talk to you a little bit about the history of AI, because once we can establish the foundation, we can understand what AI is, then we can talk about what does it really do for you as an employee, as an entrepreneur, however you show up, what does it do for you? So AI has been around since the 1940s, 50s. Alan Turing developed a paper called Computer Machinery and Intelligence. And really, what he wanted to understand is can a computer think like a human? And so he created a thing called the Turing test. And so I love to do mixed media when I present. And so you're going to hear from me, but you're also going to watch really short video clips because I think it's fun to also mix it up a little bit. And so let me get my screen going and let me make sure that I've got the sound on because I would like you to hear what is going on. So let me check my sound really quickly. But what you're going to see in this video is Alan, a little bit about Alan Turing and what he was trying to do with this Turing test. Let me look to make sure that audio, there we go. Okay, so I'm going to hit play and then just give me a thumbs up if you can hear the sound or drop me a note. It's on.
What is consciousness? Can an artificial machine really think? Does the mind just consist of neurons in the brain, or is there some intangible spark at its core? For many, these have been vital considerations for the future of artificial intelligence. But British computer scientist Alan Turing decided to disregard all these questions in favor of a much simpler one. Can a computer talk like a human? This question led to an idea for measuring artificial intelligence that would famously come to be known as the Turing test. In the 1950 paper, Computing Machinery and Intelligence, Turing proposed the following game. A human judge has a text conversation with unseen players and evaluates their responses. To pass the test, a computer must be able to replace one of the players without substantially changing the results. In other words, a computer would be considered intelligent if its conversation couldn't be easily distinguished from a human's. Turing predicted that by the year 2000, machines with 100 megabytes of memory would be able to easily pass his test. But he may have jumped the gun. Even though today's computers have far more memory than that, few have succeeded. And those that have done well focused more on finding clever ways to fool judges than using overwhelming computing power. Though it was never subjected to a real test, the first program with some claim to success was called ELIZA. With only a fairly short and simple script, it managed to mislead many people by mimicking a psychologist, encouraging them to talk more and reflecting their own questions back at them. Another early script, Perry, took the opposite approach by imitating a paranoid schizophrenic who kept steering the conversation back to his own pre-programmed obsessions. Their success in fooling people highlighted one weakness of the test. Humans regularly attribute intelligence to a whole range of things that are not actually intelligent. Nonetheless, annual competitions like the Loebner Prize have made the test more formal, with judges knowing ahead of time that some of their conversation partners are machines. But while the quality has improved, many chatbot programmers have used similar strategies to Eliza and Perry. 1997.
All right, I'm going to stop it right there. So let's go ahead and go back to the screen. So the Turing test, like it said, it was really developed just to see if a computer could simulate a human-like response. And it was really the early beginnings of what we can see right now, which was computer intelligence. Then in 1956, at a conference in Dartmouth, that's when we hear the term artificial intelligence for the first time. It was a group of gentlemen who were trying to understand, again, based on Turing's paper, could a computer think? And so they got together and started to see there's human intelligence. What is the opposite or the alternative to that? And that would be artificial intelligence. And that's when you hear that term. Now, you heard them talk about ELIZA, which was probably one of the first chatbots that was developed. You can think of it as an early chatbot. And what it really did was it was pattern matching. You would ask Eliza a question, and then Eliza would respond using the words that you asked. So if you would say, "Hey, Eliza, is it cold outside? Eliza would just do a pattern match and say, do you think it's cold outside? And so it wasn't really having a conversation. It was just doing some pattern matching with you to make sure that it could understand what was going on. Um, Again, they're trying to understand what can a computer do and how smart is a computer. They started looking at neural networks. And for those of you who are familiar with neural networks, it's a fascinating concept. But if you're not familiar with a neural network, it really is the thought process for a computer. So a neural network would be taking inputs, and the way that a computer would learn is using a neural network. And so the example that I love to share is when you're teaching children about animals, the difference between a cat and a dog. Initially, the child's going to mess that up. But after it gets so many different inputs, which is the pictures of the cat, it's going through these tiny decision makers called neural networks. So the child is thinking and trying to figure out, well, I'm getting all these pictures. The output will start to be the correct output. So that's the same thing that happened with a computer. The more imagery, the more information it would receive, the better the output was. And so they're looking at these neural networks and understanding that potentially there is a possibility that a computer could think. It was very costly. And so it didn't go very far. So then you've got early progress, but the first winter. Then the second winter, there's more investments that were happening in the computer space. But again, it was so costly and there was just not enough funding behind it. So it had its second winter. So AI and all of that started to just go by the wayside. Now we look at today, where we've got the modern era, the evolution of AI. What's very interesting is so IBM and the Deep Blue contest. So for years, winners of the chess competition were people, obviously. They fed in some information to the computer, and for the first time, the computer beat a human. Now, today we think about that and we say, of course, it's going to beat a human. It's going to look at all of the possible outcomes based on how you're moving, and it's going to figure out how to beat you. The computers were not that smart back then. So it wasn't so easily understood that that was what was going to happen. So the fact that you had a computer that beat a human under standard match conditions was huge. It was a big deal. Then you move into the big data revolution where you've got a lot of companies like Google, Microsoft, Amazon, and now it's just becoming second nature that part of their databases contain something that have to do with AI. Back then, that wasn't the case because of the cost. And I think some of you are seeing right now that the cost model behind AI is very expensive, especially with the tokens and everything else that's out there. But that's the data revolution that we're experiencing. And then the deep learning breakthrough. So AlexNet was a computer that could actually see images, or we imagine that it could see images. I found a really interesting representation of what that possibly could look like, a 3D visualization. And I'm just going to play it while I talk about AlexNet. But if a computer could actually visualize an image and try to break it down, this is an interpretation of what it potentially could look like. So you see in this image, it's trying to look at a dolphin or a shark, whatever is the mammal that it's looking at, and it's trying to break it down in as many different ways as possible to determine that this is what this thing is that we're looking at. Thousands and thousands and thousands of different views. For a computer to do that back then, it was unimaginable. Today, it's a little bit more foreseeable and we kind of get it now. And so I think this is just absolutely fascinating the way that it's trying to understand the different angles and the different ways that you could actually visualize an image. And so today, as you're working with your AI platform, it is hard to get sometimes the image that you're looking for, but the fact that it's actually producing an image that is somewhat near to what you're looking for is a little bit of a miracle. If you're curious, I'm happy to send you some of these links if you want to go and look at it on your own. But the fact that AlexNet could win an image contest was revolutionary at the time and spoke volumes to everything that was going on. So it was amazing. Now we're looking at generative AI, Claude, chat, all of these different platforms that are making such waves right now in the industry with us and our ability to understand how we can actually use AI. So let's understand a little bit about AI, what it is and what it can do. AI is really just a simulation of human intelligence in a computer form. So you want it to be able to think like a person, reason like a person. And AI is not necessarily going to follow all of the rules. It's going to learn from the data that it's being given. We're going to talk about some of the concerns behind that data. But what AI used to do, how you used it 6 months ago and how you use it today, completely different. Um, of course, AI can write emails, briefs, memos, and it can also try to write it in the tone that you define. We will discuss what prompt engineering is and what a prompt engineering framework is. So when you are writing that information, you can understand how you're going to do tone. It can summarize large data sets and give you information. One of the exercises we'll do later on today is going to an investor report. I don't know if you have done this, but it can help brainstorm ideas and give you counterpoints. It's very interesting when you ask AI to blow up this argument because I don't think that it makes sense and it will give you all of these different perspectives. A lot of the platforms right now have a research button where it can pull information specifically about targeted topics that you're looking for. You can use it in job hunting, when you're creating 30, 60, 90-day plans, timelines, all kinds of things. And so, again, what we're using AI today will be different than what you use it in a month or 2 months or 3 months. And so, understanding some of the basic uses of this technology, right on point. And that's what we're going to do a little bit later on today. Some of the terminology that you're probably familiar with, or you should be familiar with. One is just what is artificial intelligence, the simulation of human intelligence. So it's literally Claude answering a question for you, or Netflix recommending shows. Natural language processing. So this is the machine understanding, or at least simulating that it understands human language. So think Siri, Alexa, and Claude. Machine learning. It's AI that's learning from data without explicitly being programmed. So when you think about your Spotify and it's learning your taste because you give thumbs up or thumbs down, it's learning from you. Large language models are just those large databases that it pulls information from. They're called LLMs, like Claude or ChatGPT. And then I've got your prompt, the instruction that you're giving AI because you want it to do something. And then the context window, how much information it can read at once. It is fascinating how much information it actually gets. Some of the things that we should definitely be mindful of when we're using AI is data privacy. Never, ever upload anything that is sensitive, proprietary, or information that you don't want to get out there. Because once it gets out there, it's there. You can't pull it back. So you want to be mindful of data privacy, transparency, and disclosure. Depending on what you're doing, you may need to be transparent and disclose that you're using AI. When I do my webinars and presentation, AI helps me completely. I'm doing a lot of refining. AI may give me my first draft, but there's a lot of rework or adjusting that I do based on the first draft that I'm getting. Biases and hallucinations. This is my favorite part. So my husband was taking an OSHA certification test, and he was told it's open book, use whatever resources you can to pass the test. And so he would ask AI a question, and with full confidence, AI would respond. And AI was 1000% wrong, which is why the last point is so important. Human judgment still leads. Using AI as a thought partner to help you with your first draft, amazing. It will save you time. But make sure that you're reviewing that information. Your EQ is still paramount, it still cannot be replaced. And today, AI is not able to utilize EQ in their equations. So be super mindful of that and the things that you're doing. Now, let's talk a little bit about the strategic chief of staff in AI. There are people out there who feel that like they can get an AI chief of staff. That's not possible. The reason I say it's not possible is because there's a lot of things that you're doing as a chief of staff that AI is not going to be able to do. If you're reading a room and you have to adjust at the drop of a hat, AI is not going to understand those subtle nuances. There's many, many things like that. So let's talk about the strategic chief of staff. What are the pillars of the chief of staff? So I've listed four things that I have found to be super, super important. One, building trust. You are the person in the organization that is the safest um, for source of information. So information will move through you because it's moving towards you and it stops with you. So you want to be able to build trust and you want to try to build trust quickly. When I was working for a corporate vice president in one of my previous organizations, he had shared with me that he finally got budget and he wanted to bring an executive coach for the leadership team. I'd been with the organization for maybe a month, month and a half, not very long. So I hadn't built a lot of trust with this executive just yet. And so he introduced me to the person who he wanted to use, and I said, perfect, let's do it. Now, the person I had built a lot of trust with was my executive assistant. The executive assistant and the chief of staff are the tightest partnership that should be had in every organization. And if they're not tight, your job is going to be hard. And I was very lucky that I was able to have a great relationship with our executive assistant. And I said, hey, we're thinking about bringing this person on. What are your thoughts? She gave me a look immediately, and I read that look really fast. And I said, what's going on? And she said, well, you might want to ask the remaining LT what they think about this person. And I said, okay, that's not a problem. And so before I went to the LT, I went to my HR person. I said, hey, we're thinking about bringing this individual on board. Do you have any thoughts about her? And she said, I think that we should probably really revisit this. Again, I said, not a problem. I created a brief survey that I told my LT was going to be anonymous. I just wanted themes, and I was trying to get a perspective. Unanimously, none of them wanted her to come back. Mind you, I've been with the org for about a month and a half now, and I'm still trying to, provide value to the team. So I had to go to my executive and provide him with some information that was contrary to what he believed. And I like to lead with vulnerability. And I call these my open kimono moments where I'm like, I'm going to be vulnerable and I need you to not judge or make me feel some kind of way. And so I said, hey, I have some information I want to share with you about your coach, but it's not in light with how you viewed the feedback that you received in the past. And I shared with him the information, and he was shocked. And he said, I thought that everybody liked this person and went down this narrative. And I said, well, and we went back and forth for a little while. And he said, I want you to be able to feel like you can share anything with me. Thank you for telling me this, but I'm really surprised. After a series of conversations, he actually came back to me and said, I think I'm experiencing some bias with this coach. And I happen to have two coaches in my back pocket. Advice I was given by an executive leader a long time ago. When you've got a problem, have two solutions in your back pocket that you can go to immediately. And he says, I think I want to visit the coaches that you recommended. And we ended up going with one of those coaches. Now, what I can tell you about the relationship with the CVP is that if I ever questioned anything or I had a concern, he was Johnny on the spot listening because he knew I didn't take the role to be a yes person, but that I was really there to make sure that we were using the best decisions, the best information for our team. So, one, you want to be able to build trust. Two, you want to protect your principal's time. Now, that doesn't mean that you're managing their calendar. What it does mean is that you are aware of the conversations and the things that are happening within the org and with that principle. And there may be opportunities where a delegate needs to go, you might need to go and step in place for that principle. So, understanding what is going on and protecting that time is super important, which leads you to three, where you can anticipate needs. You understand what needs to be done. As a chief of staff, rarely am I ever given a thing to do. Most of the time, I'm saying these are the things that I'm doing. I typically have one-on-ones with my executives in the beginning of the week. I show up with a list and I'm like, these are things that I'm working on, and this is why I'm working on them. Is there anything on this list that you think I should not be putting my attention to? Nope, those seem right. Is there anything that's missing from this list? Nope, you've hit everything. I'm anticipating what the organization needs, what my principal needs, and I'm acting upon it. I'm not waiting for an email. I'm not waiting to be acted upon. I am doing the acting. And then providing that candid feedback. That example that I shared earlier with my executive and the coach. I needed to feel comfortable that we could have a conversation that could be tough. And he felt comfortable enough that he could have this conversation with me, which really solidified our relationship. So those are the pillars of being a strategic thought partner for as a chief of staff. The other thing that you're going to be doing is you're going to be managing a lot of executive relationships. So you want to understand your executive's working style. I had one executive who said, at the end of the day, if you at me in an email, I pull all of those up, and that's how I end my day, is everything that I've got to respond to. If I'm not added to, I don't look because I get way too many emails. There's other executives who have blackout periods. The best thing that you can do is create a team agreement or a team charter that says when are the best times to be able to access somebody. And how do they want to be communicated to? Do they want to get a Teams or Slack message? Do they want an email? Do they want a text? And you can work within that style. Establishing clear communication. So, what that means is there's no surprises. You want to make sure that you are ahead of the things that are happening. I had a situation with one of my executives where somebody had um, utilized one of our vendors um, inappropriately. Well, we thought it was somebody on our team. And so I sent a note to my executive and I said, this is just a heads up. I don't need you to act on anything. I'm on top of this, but I think you need to be aware of this. And if something changes, I'll let you know, but I just don't want you to be surprised in a senior leadership meeting if this is brought up. And he said, perfect. Thank you. That's how you want to be thinking. How do you establish clear communication with that executive? You want to develop trust through consistency. The reason this is so important is not because you're going to be getting all of these things right. It's when you have those moments where something falls through the crack. You want the reaction to be, that's not like Anne Marie. I need to see what's going on. Instead of, what happened? That's frustrating. If you are consistent and they understand how you work, again, it's not for the moments when things are good. It's for the moments when something is not going well, that they know you and they understand how your typical reaction will be. And they're like, let's give her some time so she can let us know what's going on. This is how you become a strategic thought partner with an executive. The other thing that you'll find yourself very involved in is cross-functional leadership. Not a lot of chief of staffs have a team. Sometimes they do, but not all of the time. So you're really going to have to understand how do you navigate the org? Who are all of the key players? Who are all of the stakeholders? You're going to have clients, you're going to have customers, you're going to have partners, you're going to have stakeholders that are within your org, stakeholders that are without the org. And how does that all plug in and work together? So you want to be mindful of that. You'll also want to understand team alignment. The thing that you will realize is that you're going to have a lot of strong voices that have solid agendas, but cannot all be done at the same time. And you've got to be comfortable in navigating that space, which is why my next thing is conflict resolution, because not everyone is going to always get their way. And if you're uncomfortable having hard conversations with people, being a chief of staff may not be the right role because you're always going to be having hard conversations. I host a monthly web series called Chat with the Chief, and I talk to people who are chief of staffs in a variety of industries. And I had one of my recent speakers who said, it's my job to scratch every itch, to poke holes in everything. I'm the person who I'm going to try to blow up whatever you're trying to do to make sure that you're doing the right thing for the right reasons for this org. So it's not necessarily that you're mediating, but you are facilitating conversations to try to make sure that you get to the right decision. It's not that you're trying to be right. And then you're an executive liaison. There are opportunities where you can step in for your leader and make sure that that voice is being represented because they can't be everywhere at once, which is why there's delegates and you sit on the leadership team. You are one of those leaders. And so you are showing up in that space. I love this. Why brilliant operators stay stuck and what it costs them. We're going to talk about the first three. Four, five are covered in the Chief of Staff Academy. You're optimizing task instead of trust. What is an example of that? I'm going to go through a couple of examples and I'm going to jump to the next slide to show you how you can switch that narrative around. You have a deck that you've prepared for your principal, and there is some sensitive information that still needs to be worked out. Your principal routes it to someone else and not you. You've completed a task, but you need to be able to gain that trust. We'll talk about how you can flip the script on that. You're waiting to be asked. If you are waiting to get the email that tells you what needs to be done, decisions have already been made and you're late to the party. You don't want to be receiving the email. Um, you want to be the person who's sending out that email. And this one is a big one. Sometimes you'll find that people confuse access with influence. Because I happen to be in this meeting with these executives means something. Depends on what the outcome of that meeting is and what your role is in that meeting. You can attend every leadership meeting, but if you're not owning some of the follow through, you'll need to revisit what your role is. And so let's talk about how do you switch the script on that? How do you optimize trust instead of task? Because you don't want to optimize your task instead of trust. So in that first example, we talked about you're curating a slide deck for your principal, and there's sensitive information. Be proactive and make yourself the test of your principal's thinking. Ask them to work with you on that sensitive information and pressure test them, or tell them that you will own the resolution of that item. Now you're actually owning an outcome to a decision that has a strategic impact to the org instead of just getting a task done. We talked about waiting to be asked. Don't wait to be asked. You want to be very anticipatory. You're not reacting to an inbox. You want to be the person that's sending out those messaging. So you want to flag the things that nobody's talking about. You want to own that agenda, not the to-do list. You want to define what is the leadership deciding this quarter or what are they working on? That's how you flip the script. And the last example that I shared, which was access without influence. If you are in those meetings, control the framing of that meeting. Own how the choices are reaching the principal. So then you are built into the decision, having a perspective on what is being discussed and asking questions on that. One of the ways that you can do this is if you do not have a champion or a mentor and you are trying to learn, sidebars with that champion or the mentor so you can participate a lot more actively in those decisions. And so you are a part of that leadership body and not just somebody who happens to be sitting in the room. The role of the chief of staff is amazing, and there's so many ways to get into that role and become a master in that role. There's different entry points. So for me, my entry point, I was a project manager. And I worked as a project manager for a really long time. And I had a great manager who said, "What do you want to do next?" And I always own my own career development. And I wasn't quite sure. And I said, "Well, I don't know. What are some thoughts that you have?" And we whiteboarded some ideas. And the chief of staff was one of the roles. And I'll tell you about how I got into the role, but I want you to realize that there's a lot of different ways that you can become a chief of staff. There isn't a standard route to get into it. You could be communications. You could be a person who was in operations. Like I said, for me, I was in project management. There are product managers, program managers, a variety of individuals who have that knack for being able to manage large things without a lot of help, without a lot of guidance, and getting it done. So the entry point is varied. If you've got a question about how you can actually enter into the chief of staff role, let me know, and I'd be happy to help you. The way that I actually got my first chief of staff position is I was talking to one of my managers, and we were looking for the next step for me. And he had a peer who was a general manager who was hiring a chief of staff because his chief of staff was retiring. And he said, "Why don't you go and talk to him and see if he can give you some perspective into the chief of staff role?" And I'm like, "Perfect." So I went, I had a couple conversations with him. Happened to have already had a relationship with this individual, so I knew him fairly well. A few weeks later, he drops me a note and says, "Well, do you want the job?" I was a little shocked. I went back to my manager and I said, I wasn't actually interviewing. I was just trying to get some information, but he's offered me the role. And he said, "Well, do you want the role?" And I said, "Yes, yes, I want the role." And that's how I got into my first chief of staff role. It doesn't happen like that for everybody. I have had chief of staff roles where I had to interview and was the best candidate and was selected, but there's a lot of different ways to get into it. And so make sure that you don't put up an arbitrary wall with, well, I can never get into it because I don't have enough experience or I don't have this degree or this. There's a lot of ways to get into it, and we can discuss that. But once you get into the role, then there's this whole aspect of role mastery. How do you get better? Build your network, take training classes. I had alluded a little bit earlier to a Chief of Staff Academy that I've developed that I'll talk about a little bit later in this presentation, but it goes through some of the foundational aspects of how to be an effective Chief of Staff, and you get a credential for that. And then future paths for Chief of Staff. Um, Years ago, the Chief of Staff was seen as a way to learn the business and then move into another role. Some of that is accurate. I actually have friends who are chief of staffs, and they've been chief of staffs for 15 plus years, a very, very long time. So it is a role that you can do historically for a long time. But some individuals actually look at it as I want to learn the business holistically, and then I want to move into an executive leadership type of a position. A very good friend of mine, after she was a chief of staff in the military, and at an organization that we worked together, she went and built her own cybersecurity company and is a CTO at her company. And so, what can you do if you decide you don't want to be a chief of staff? Anything. Just depends on how you define your career, your progression, and the things that you're doing to feed into that. I want to jump really quickly back to some common AI tools and platforms because there's several out there. And after this call, one of the things that I love people to do is pick a couple of prompts and then create each prompt in each one of these tools and just see the variety of responses that you get. They can all be used for a variety of different things. They all have a free version. Um, I initially had used a lot of ChatGPT. I've recently moved to Claude. I'm loving Claude right now. There's Gemini, there's Perplexity, there's a, a plethora of tools. So take a moment and just experiment with the tools to see which one is giving you the outcomes that you are anticipating. So, what I want to talk about specifically today, though, is Claude and why I use Claude. And it's not just another tool for me, it's literally my partner and the things that I do. Some of the things with Claude specifically that I enjoy is the long context window. And like I said, there's a lot of information that you can plug in there to get your response. The thing that I find interesting with Claude is that it likes to show its work. So it tells you, I'm doing this and I'm doing that. And if you're a coder, that's wonderful for you. I'm not necessarily a coder, and so I see all of that being turned away, and I'm like, okay, that's great, but just give me my response. But Claude reads everything. I have tried to see how far I can push Claude, and I think I might have had 4 or 5 very, very large documents with a template with information that I wanted, and it took it a while, but it ended up coalescing everything into one beautiful presentation that I was looking for. And so test it and see how far it can go. Now, I'm not sure about the other platforms, but I know that you can only run one prompt at a time because I've literally had 2 windows with Claude just to see if I could run 2 at the same time. And it does struggle with that, which makes sense. But test it. The reasoning it tells you, like I said, it shows its work, but then it tells you why it's giving you what it's giving you, which is really nice. This is something that's very helpful because one of the exercises that I'll do when I'm helping folks is we look at how we use AI to update resumes. And you look at your current resume, you look at the job description, you ask AI, and we'll do this exercise today. You ask AI to help pull out the things in your current resume that match the job description, but you're truthful about it, but asking it, why is it making the changes? Because sometimes you may not agree with the changes that AI is making to your resume. And I love that it's got its reasoning behind it. Confidential by design, the fact that it's not trying to train conversations based on what you're saying, the tone intelligence. Sometimes you do have to ask your AI platform, I'd like it in this tone, or I'd like it to have this voice. And once they start to get to know you and your voice, you don't necessarily have to have the tone policed. And then honest pushback. There are times, so I wanted Claude to do a caricature of me. And it said it looks like it's a picture of a human, and I can't do that because I can't verify if you're the human or not. And I thought that was really interesting. Now I turned around and I asked Chat to do it, and Chat did it in a second. So that's why I say you should test out both or all of the platforms to see what it's going to give you and if it meets the need that you want. How do chiefs use Claude every day? So this is an easy one, meeting efficiency. Turn on Claude so it can capture the summary, um, create action item lists, and some workflows for you. Strategic documents. As you are in a position where you're looking at vision documents, strategy documents, it can start to pull out the nuanced meanings that you need and help you understand that. Stakeholder mapping. How do you do stakeholder mapping? I'm excited for this exercise that we're going to do in just a little bit. Communication, the same exercise I'm going to show you how you can have AI give you the same message, give you a message for multiple audiences, but it's the same one. Scenario planning that we talked about. And then if you want to learn how to build a digital twin, that's something that we can definitely explore at a later date. But these are just some of the ways that you can utilize Claude every single day. So what we want to start out with is prompt engineering. And you want to keep this 5-layer prompt framework. This is what I always use. Why is it important? Because the more specific you are with your AI engine, the better you will get, the response will be. It's not always going to be the best response because we know that there's that aspect of human oversight that we need, but it's going to be a strong response. So, one, you want to provide a persona. Because I used Claude so much, it knows who I am and it knows my audience. And so it has an idea of who my persona is. The task, super important. What is the task that you want it to do? The steps. Sometimes there's going to be steps that it's got to go through. You want to identify all of that. The context, is it a type of company? Who is the audience? What are the constraints? This can't be more than 500 words. And then the structure. How do you want it to provide you with the output? I am going to open up Claude right now. And if you'd like, feel free to follow along with me. You can either use Claude or Chat. Either one will work. I am going to grab, now this is something that I love that is new for uh, the platforms. If you don't have the prompts written out, you can do a screen grab. And so I'm going to do a screen grab of what you just saw, and I'm telling it to act like a senior comms director with 15 years of board experience. I wanted to draft a one-page brief. We're going to summarize the context. It's going to go to the CEO, and I've given it a structure. Now, I've given Claude no contextual information. So whatever it's going to pump up to us is not going to be information that is useful to me, but what it is, it's going to be information that you can see how it's actually providing you with a view into that. So while it's doing this, I'm going to move to my next slide, which is this is the slide that it's working on right now. So if you want to grab this, I'm going to have my assistant actually, you know what, I just did the screen grab. I'm going to have my assistant put the screen grab or the prompt in the chat so you can go ahead and do it. We're going to go back to Claude. And this is what I love, a little bit longer. Thanks for your patience. Like you feel like Claude is actually trying to work with you and help you get a response. It always makes me smile. Now, one of the things that I said is test it out in multiple platforms. So while Claude is doing this, we're going to go to chat and we're going to ask chat to do the exact same thing. We'll see which one goes faster. Um, Chat won this race. Kind of interesting. And if it had context, this would mean something to me. It would mean something to us. Today, it doesn't mean anything. We're just trying to test out the result. Sometimes Claude will ask subsequent questions to make sure that it gets exactly what you're looking for. So we will come back and see what exactly does Claude put out there. But this is just an example of test it out and see what you get. So we're going to spend some time right now doing some practicing. I want to talk to you first about Claude skills and connectors, and then we're going to start building these things. So what is a skill? It's an instruction. It's something that you want Claude to do on a repeated basis. Why do you use it? Because you want it to know that you need it to do this thing once and then continually doing it over and over again. And you can trigger it with a slash command. You can trigger it with a lot of different ways. And so let me find this is a bonus skill. This is a skill that I think we all love. So I use both Claude and Chat on a regular basis as I'm writing, and my team uses it. But we know that it sounds like a computer, and the biggest offender are these M dashes that drive us crazy, drives me nuts. And so I'm going to go back to my screen, and here we go. Claude finished its, no, that's Chat. Claude is still working. Claude's having a moment. So while it's still working, one of the things that you can do within Claude is go to Customize. You're going to go to Skills, and you see that I actually have my M dash is already in there. I could delete this, and then historically, what you had to do was give specific instruction to Claude on how to build the skill. Now you can just type in and say, Claude, build me a skill called no M dashes, which is what you saw on the screen earlier. And what it does is now it's telling you these are the rules that I'm going to use for this skill. And then you ask it to enable the skill. I think it's still trying to work on this chat. Let's see. It's still working on this one. So we're going to go back to skills. And so it's telling you this is how I'm going to do this with M dashes. This is the way that I'm going to replace them, how it makes the most sense. You can create any kind of skill within Claude. My niece, who's 18, works for me. She is a Michael Jackson fan, which is something that I love. I love that she's 18 and she loves Michael Jackson because he's just amazing. And so she created a fangirl skill. I would ask you to think about something that you enjoy. I had one of my clients say, I didn't even think about using some of this for personal. Absolutely. This is the best way for you to learn how to use these tools is think about something that you like and then create it in there. And it does it for you. This is one of the ones that we'll look at a little bit later, which is the leadership update. But there's a lot of different ways for you to utilize how you're using skills. And so this was the skill that we had talked about. Um, Create a skill called no M dashes. Whenever I share writing, rewrite it so M dashes becomes a comma, a period, a colon, or a set of parentheses, whichever reads most naturally. Never use M dashes in anything you write for me and save it so I can use it with a share command. So I'll have my assistant paste this one in the chat so you've got it also. But I think this is a great bonus skill. Now, I talked a little bit about connectors. I don't know if you know what a connector is, but it's literally looking at what are the applications or the tools that you're using right now and how, Wendy, I see your question. Is in Claude, is skills only available in the paid version of Claude? That's a great question. I've only had the paid version, so I've always had access to it. But I can look that up for you and get back to you. Actually, I'll have my assistant look it up and she'll send you a response because that's a great question. Um, if you don't want to pay for Claude, but you want to be able to use some of the functionality, I know with a lot of the AI platforms, they provide you with reduced functionality. So you don't get everything that you would normally get if you had the paid version, but we'll look that up and make sure that we have an answer for you before the call is over. So thank you for that thoughtful question. But let's talk about connectors. Connectors is the way that Claude will connect to software that you're using today. And so I'm going to go back to my screen, and it's still in the same spot where you go to customize. All right, so it's still working on this. It's giving you a nice line, but it wants more information, which is the thing about Claude. It tends to be very comprehensive. So it's actually asking, should I run this prompt or looking to pressure test the framework itself? Let's say run the prompt. Yes, and then we'll come back to it. But we're going to go back to the side where we've got customized. We're going to look at connectors, and you'll see the ones that I've already connected to. The list of connectors is endless. And what you want to do is, again, some organizations may already have a version of the AI platform that they're using within their company. Feel free to use that. If not, and you're using it for personal use, you can attach it to anything you've got here. So my business, I use Calendarly. And so I've attached it to Calendarly. I use Canva, Gamma, Gmail. These are all of the products that I use on a regular basis. I do have Slack and I could connect to Slack. So if I decided I wanted to connect to Slack, it's going to ask me, who am I? I'd have to think of which workspace I want to connect to. I'm going to disconnect it to Calendar actually. So we're going to disconnect Calendar and then I'm going to connect it back again. So now I want to browse all of their connectors and they have a ton. And I want Calendary. I say connect. It's going to look for an opportunity to connect. I'm going to add in my verification code. It's going to ask me what kind of permissions do I want to give to Claude. And I want to give Claude all the permissions because if I wanted to read from that tool, it has to be able to access a lot. And now it's one of the ones that I have attached. Now, this is something that you want to be aware of. Whenever you have a connector that you're connecting to Claude, it's going to ask you, what kind of permissions do you want it to have, or do you just want it to have read only? For purposes of this presentation, we're going to say always approve everything. So now anytime I ask it to do something and it has to connect to Calendary, it's going to look to see, do I have permission to do that? And if it doesn't have permission, it won't do the thing that you've asked it to do. If it does have permission, it's going to do the thing that you asked it to do. With Canva, again, I've given it permission so it can do a lot of things all of the time. With Gamma, it's saying, oh, I don't have permission. I'm going to need to get your approval before I do these things. So as you're looking at connectors, if you press the plus, browse through the list and see which ones you want to actually have it connect to um, as you're using Claude. We're going to go back to customize. And then here's the prompt engineering, uh, the brief that we asked it to do. Prepared for the CEO, really quick and short based on the prompt that we shared with it. Let's jump back to the screen. So when you are looking at using a connector, again, this is a great way for you to start to automate some of the work that you're doing. The example that I shared with you was using your calendar, and you can give it this prompt and then ask it, what are the meetings that I need to see? Summarize what I've got to do, and it's going to provide you with a brief of the things that are most important to you and ensure that you have the data that you're looking for. let's try something different. Let's look at building a workflow. Now, building a workflow um, really just means that you want it to be able to automate something for you on an ongoing basis. And so when you apply the five-layer framework that I've talked about, and this is the workflow, it'll do the same thing for you every single week. And so we're not going to be very specific. We're going to take this workflow as is. I'm going to go back into Claude. I'm going to post the image. And then for the task, I'm going to give it a little bit of information. Should be a weekly brief. For the steps, I wanted to share with me actions, risks, and gaps. For the context, my executive is, we'll say that my executive's style is direct, and the org is healthcare, and the audience are the leadership team, and the output is a summary with bullets. Now, Claude is going to ask me a lot of questions because I haven't given it a lot to go off of. I've just given it, again, a prompt for it to start to play with, and it's not going to know exactly where it's pulling the information. Now, if I have my connectors, so my connector in Claude is not attached to my job because the things that I do with my job, uh, there's privacy concerns as we discussed. And so I cannot pull that into something that is a non-private LLM. But if you are using it at your job, you can connect your Slack, your email, and you can say, pull the information from my Slack and my emails and provide me with an output. Now, again, we're going to have a little bit of fun here. Here's the template. It's created it for me, and it's asking me, do I want to paste my notes or run a realistic sample brief? So we just want a realistic sample brief. And now it's going to make something up for us. Let's go back to, so it's thinking. While it's thinking, I'm going to go ahead and go back to my slides. And then this will be the next one that we do right now. We're going to jump back. And here's the brief that it's created. Weekly leadership brief prepared by the chief of staff. Here are the actions. Here's the risk and gaps and the summary. If I had notes, I would have it run through all of my notes and create this narrative for me. The portion of this where it's important to have human oversight is that you want to curate the information. Because again, AI will get things wrong with a high level of confidence. Ah, Wendy, I saw that you problem solved your own question. Awesome, awesome. I'm glad that that worked out. So now we're going to go, this is a fun exercise to run. And again, I'll make sure that you see exactly what I'm going to do. But in this particular exercise, we are going to run an investor report. Now, I personally am not a financial person. I don't like investor reports. I started listening and reading them in the last few years when every company decided they wanted to lay off people every other day and related it all to earnings reports and that they were not hitting their targets or money was being diverted to something else. And I said, well, I want to read about that. I want to understand. So let me take a special interest in this. I also happen to have a few friends who are really good in the financial space. And so I use them as my test to make sure that I'm understanding things correctly. And so what we're going to do is we're going to run an exercise with an investor report, and we're going to do a couple different prompts. This particular prompt, we talked about stakeholder translation. Same message, multiple audiences. An example of this is that you might have to have a message that goes to managers, to a leadership team, and the organization. And it's the same message, but it has to be nuanced for each one of those groups. And so, how do you do that? So, we're going to jump right back into Claude. And I wanted to go with Microsoft because they had their earnings report. All of this information is very, very public. And so it's nothing that is proprietary, that is hidden, or anything like that. You'll type in Microsoft.com. It's going to give you this lovely page. We're going to scroll all the way to the bottom and go to Investor Report. Here's the Investor Report. Thank you very much, Microsoft. This is what I wanted. I'm going to grab that Investor Report and I'm going to pump it in here. It says homepage, but it's actually the URL. Now I'm going to take the prompt that I shared with you earlier and I'm going to paste it into the chat. And we can have some fun because we're going to do it also in Chat GPT. So here's the prompt. We'll see who gives us a result first. And we'll see what kind of results that we get from both of them. So now both of the platforms are doing their due diligence. They're trying to read through as much of the report. And to give you a reminder, I'm going to post this back to the screen. This is what we're asking it to do. We're attaching the report and we're saying, read it to me, give me a brief in three different ways, three different lenses. One for somebody who's new to earnings, so I don't really understand very much. So what's happening? Lens number two is somebody who is familiar with the report. What were the numbers that moved? What didn't move? What is management signaling next? That's really important as a chief of staff for you to understand where's the team going. And the last one, I'm a finance pro. I don't need you to break anything down for me. Just give it to me raw so I have it. Excuse me. And then do it in three different sections so I can review what you've provided for me. So let me make the screen a little bit bigger because this is kind of small. And here's what Microsoft uh, earnings report in chat looks like. And it's given to me in three different lenses. And I could read all of this and see what I get. Which question would you ask? This was one of the things that I had added the executive before the next meeting. This is your platform being a thought partner with you. What is the leading indicator? What should I look at? I like that it's telling you why it's asking the question. Now let's see if Claude is done. So Claude is also done. It didn't do it side by side, but it did give you the three lenses. And what's the one question? So this was the one question. Azure is accelerating, but cloud cost of revenue is 47% over 30% revenue growth. At what point does the CapEx curve force a margin or guidance reset? And is this quarter the peak of that pressure or the start of it? So it's really trying to understand what kind of changes do we need to make within the Azure environment based on what we're seeing as it has to do with the cost of goods. And do we need to make a change? This one went straight to AI. Same exact report, but two different ways to look at it. Now, I love to do this with Claude and with chat. But let's say you read this report and it's still going over your head. So I say, explain to me like I was a 10-year-old. Now, I don't know what 10-year-olds are going to be looking at investor reports, but kids are extremely smart. And so there may be some out there, and I'm not going to put it past them that they're looking at it. So what I love is that it's saying, all right, let's to somebody who's never read an earnings report and you want it as a 10-year-old, we sold more lemonade than we did last time. More people came to buy from us. Like you can start to change the tone of the prompt to help you understand the narrative that you want to make sure that you're getting. This is this is really helpful. With this, let's say that we've looked at this investor report and we need to have a presentation where we're highlighting what we've learned thus far. One of the tools that I absolutely love using is called Gamma AI. So we'll say using the Finance Pro view, actually, we're just going to take it straight into Gamma. I'm going to grab the Finance Pros view, which is the last lens that we had. We're going to grab all this information. Oh yeah, that's all I want. Now we're going to go into Gamma. Now, I'm not paid by Gamma. I just happen to love this platform. They do have a free version, but I use the paid version because I use it all the time. I use it for work as well as I use it outside of work. A little bit of information about me, since we're all family here, is in my church, I teach little kids songs and I have to visualize the songs for them. And so I use Gamma to help me come up with images so I can teach them songs. And so there's a mix of all kinds of things that I use here at Gamma. But today we're going to take that Finance Pro view. You can do a lot of different things here, but we are going to paste in the text. I'm going to paste in that little text that I had. I'm going to remove this. You can do a lot, you can present the information in a lot of different ways, but we want a presentation. I want to preserve the exact text because I don't quite trust that it's going to get it for me the way that I want it. We're going to go to the prompt editor. Now, the nice thing is it's going to give you some options on how you want it to look. We're going to pick this one. You can select different images. We're going to do photos. I promise this tool is just amazing. And it just gives you more and more options. Now, cards are the number of slides. So right now it's going to create 5 slides. If I didn't want five slides, and we'll go back to this because when we do the resume update, I'll show you how you can actually do some different things. But for today's purposes, we want 5 slides. It's asking, do I want to preserve the text? Do I want to condense the text? You have a lot of different options, or fill my outline with additional information. I want it to be detailed, and I'm happy with the five slides. So now we're going to tell it to generate the slides. Now, I believe in the free version, the Gamma logo does appear, but if you save it as a PowerPoint or anything else, you can remove it. So it's not something where you can't funge it out of there. But because I have a paid version, I don't have to worry about it. Everything that Gamma is creating right now, you can change. So none of this is static. It's all dynamic. If you wanted a different picture, if you wanted more pictures, if you wanted less pictures, you can do all of that. And now um, I'm always creating slides for discussions and presentations. It just created a slide deck for me in less than a minute. My thing with when I have to create presentations is I want it to look uniform. And I don't want to go in and mess with fonts and all of these things. Let's say that we're all done with this and I've got to change it around. We can always go back to the prompt. I want it to be in gold. We're going to freeform it. I don't want 10 cards. I want 1 card, and I want it to be concise and an illustration. We'll see what kind of illustration it does with 1 card. Now it's going to go back through all of the data that I've provided and say, oh, I've got to make a change. Let's see how I can condense it so you still get the crux of information for this presentation without overwhelming whoever's reading this with a lot of data. And so as you can see, it did all of this change for me. And I don't even have to think about it. Like this, for me, this is one of the greatest things about a lot of this AI software that's out there. When you can find, and I've got a list of software that I love using. This is one of my favorite ones. It just created my one-page slide for me. And there you have it. So we talked about the investor slide, and this was the stakeholder translator. So we did that a little bit in the last slide where we said we want it to be in three different ways. And this is the same thing. It's rewrite this update for my CEO, for my cross-functional team, and for an external stakeholder. And you can paste or use, we're 6 weeks behind. We can go ahead and and post this and use this, and it's super, super helpful. The next thing I wanted to share with you was building an SOP. Um, so I've worked at companies where there's a lot of documentation around SOPs and others where there's almost none. And the absence of written documentation, if you're not going to go all the way to one side and but not having anything, like you need to have some things documented. And sometimes I just don't have all of the time in the world to sit and type everything. And so we're going to do the same exercise over here. We're going to go to, this time we'll go ahead and go to um, chat. I'm going to grab an image of what the SOP was, or at least the SOP that I want to have written. I'm going to post it in here. And then I'm going to give it some additional instructions. So the SOP is for onboarding a new employee. Um, it'll be used by the onboarding buddy. Here's how I currently do it. I'm not going to give it instruction. I'm just going to let it come up with something. And then the output is, it's going to give me a numbered list with everything, and it's going to return it as a one-page SOP. So again, because I've not fed it context, it's just going to come up with whatever it can come up with. When you actually have context, you can give it information and it will feed in exactly what you're looking for. So here is a standard SOP for somebody who's onboarding. If I was an HR person, this is a great start. This is not the only thing that I'm going to use, but this is a wonderful, wonderful start to building what that SOP needs to look like. I hope that you guys are finding some of this information helpful and useful. Like I said, this is just the beginning of how you can utilize AI in your space today and how you can use it tomorrow. Um, I wanted to pause for just a moment. I did see that there was a few questions. Do you have any additional questions for me right now, before I move on? If there's not, I'll go ahead and move on and we'll probably wrap up a little bit early and I'll give you some time back. I think that we're just hitting everything right on the nose. So this is great. So what did we discuss today? AI, it's got a history that is longer than just the last 20 years. It's been around for a while. We were able to dive into what is a strategic chief of staff. And it's not that you're managing tasks, you're managing outcomes, you're managing outputs. You can utilize Claude and chat as your thought partner for a lot of the work that you're doing. Remember, using that 5-layer prompt is going to be key in writing those prompts and being effective in getting the results that you're looking for. We've done several exercises, briefs, learning how to translate things for multiple audiences, and then I threw in a whole bunch of extra exercises for you if you are curious. So again, if I were to try to teach you everything that I knew, it would take longer than the 90 minutes. We're just about at 90 minutes that we've been together, which has been amazing for me. And again, I hope this has been helpful for you. If you're curious about learning more, please make sure that you set up some time with me so we can discuss what you're interested in learning. I am an executive coach. And I also have the Chief of Staff Academy. And I mentioned that I was going to talk a little bit about the Chief of Staff Academy. I'm going to jump to that slide really quickly so you can see just what's in the Chief of Staff Academy. It is an accredited program that takes you through the foundational aspects of what the Chief of Staff Academy is, what you will learn. My approach is actually pretty unique because not only are you doing the classes, but you have coaching that's layered into that. So we look at what is happening in your real life and how do we apply the theory behind what you're learning in the Chief of Staff Academy. So, as you're thinking about what's next for you, whether you just want some coaching or you want to do a hybrid of both, my assistant is going to post in the chat an opportunity for you to have a connection with me so we can meet and we can just talk about what are some things that you can do moving forward um, to either build your career, be a stronger strategic operator if you're not already in the chief of staff space. How do you move into that space? And what are the things that you can do to be effective? Now, I do have time to share with you a bonus exercise if you're curious. So um, let me shut my sharing and I'm gonna go back to Claude. And this is an exercise that I love to share with folks if they are actually transitioning into a new role, if they're looking for a new role, if you don't know how to use AI for a job search, here's a really easy way to do it. I'm going to pull from one of my presentations. Let's see. I have so many of them. Got to go up. Give me 1 second. What I want to share with you right now is, like I said, how do you use AI when you are in a position where you want to look for a different role? Oh, perfect. Here we go. Let me share my screen one more time. All right. Hopefully you can all see my screen again. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull in um, a resume that I created for purposes of this workshop, and then a job description that I've created for purposes of this workshop. So we've got chief of staff resume and a strategic program specialist. So I'm going to pull these over. So the resume and the strategic program specialist. And I'm going to say update my resume to be ATS friendly and pull in where there are my current role and the job description. Um, Share the reason. So now I wanted to look at my resume. So this, like I said, this is the dummy resume that I'm creating. I want it to be ATS friendly. So for those of you who are not familiar, the ATS system is the automatic tracking system that screens out. It doesn't screen people in, which is unfortunate because you want it to be able to screen people in. But if it doesn't see keywords, if there are invisible tables, anything like that, it automatically kicks you out. So you could be the most qualified person for that role. But if it's not just a standard resume that the ATS can read, it kicks you out immediately, which is not cool. But we live in a day where I spoke to a recruiter the other day about a friend who was applying for a job, and she said in one day she had over 400 applicants. There are some roles that see over 1,000 applicants in a day or 2 days. And so to get through a large number like that, what you'll find is that employers, whether it's good or bad, they're using a variety of tools to help them find the best person for the role. I think my sharing went. Oh, okay. I want to make sure that this is still sharing. Whether it's that the best person for the role. And so then it really just becomes a numbers game almost with who's getting what role, who's getting the interview for whatever role that they may be looking at. So right now it's looking through both the documents. It's reading everything I've provided it, and it's trying to build the resume in a manner that will work the best. And this is what I find super interesting because as it's building the resume, you're going to get something brand new that you can utilize. As you are in a position where you may be looking for a different job, we have passed the days of you can use one resume for a multiplicity of roles. You literally have to cater your resume to that job. There's a lot of different thoughts and ideas on that. But again, if you consider who you're up against for a position, and if they are catering their resume for a role, it may be something that you want to consider, especially if you're looking to get a specific role. And here, what it's done, it's giving me the changes. So it removed emojis, it aligned the job with what I was looking for, and it's telling me exactly what it's changed, what it hasn't changed. This is a super dense resume. And so one of my skills that I've actually listed in there is to bold strategic words. And it will go through the resume and it will bold a lot of the words um, to make it stand out. So this is just a little bonus that I wanted to throw in there um, that I hope that you find useful and helpful. Um, but that is my presentation about Claude and the Chief of Staff. And like I said, feel free to set up some time with me so we can have some more conversations. If there's more things that you want to learn, if there's things that you don't understand, if you are curious about this role, if you are looking to make a change, um, I know that there's an opportunity where I can help you make that change. I hope that this was useful for you. I enjoy teaching about this because I think it's fascinating the things that you can get from Claude and the AI applications that are out there. And I hope you have a great rest of your day, a great morning if you started, and you're very, very welcome. Thank you for posting in the chat. And I look forward to connecting with you very, very soon. So I'm glad, oh, wonderful. I'm glad that you learned a few things for sure. There's so much to learn. And we'll make sure to reach out to you with any questions or anything that you might want to know. So have a wonderful rest of your day, folks, and thank you so much for joining.